Everyone always thought he would remain in the background, quietly standing by Princess Anne's side without a single complaint. For years, Sir Timothy Laurence has been known as a symbol of devotion and discretion within the royal family. But now, a shocking revelation from the man himself, the loyal husband of Princess Anne, has stunned the royal circle. No one saw this coming. And you might be surprised too. Can you guess what's about to be revealed? If you can comment. 1. If not comment, 0 below. Don't forget to share your thoughts, hit follow, and join us as we uncover the untold secrets of the British royal family. For years, he quietly observed all the power struggles and behind-the-scenes rivalries unfolding behind the palace doors. But only recently, he broke his silence and revealed a dark secret about Queen Camilla, a truth that could completely change the public's perception of her. So what is that secret? Why did it take so many years to come to light? And how deeply will this revelation shake the royal family's already fragile relationships? This is a layered and complex story between two royal women. Imagine two women living within the same royal family yet completely different in personality and behavior. This is the portrait of Princess Anne and Queen Camilla, two women who have never shared a close or warm relationship. Their connection isn't bound by affection, but by years of simmering tension, wary glances, and an unspoken rivalry that has never truly ended. The rift between them didn't begin suddenly. It has been smoldering for decades, tracing back to a tangled romance in the 1970s. At the time, Princess Anne was deeply involved in a romantic relationship with Andrew Parker Bowles, the man who would later become Camilla's husband. Although the two couldn't marry due to Andrew being Catholic, a faith that conflicted with royal protocol at the time, their relationship was believed to be genuinely heartfelt. In 1973, Andrew and Camilla reunited and got married. From that point on, Anne was visibly uncomfortable with Camilla's presence. The woman who had married the man Anne once deeply loved, frequently appearing at events in Buckingham Palace. But things didn't stop there. Nearly 3 decades later, Camilla went on to marry Prince Charles, Anne's younger brother. This overlapping relationship made it impossible for Anne to truly accept Camilla's presence within the royal family. According to those close to the palace, Camilla often felt pressured and overshadowed by Princess Anne's strong-willed and determined personality. For years, Camilla tried to keep her distance, even avoiding contact with her sister-in-law. However, tensions reached a boiling point during King Charles's coronation. At that time, Camilla expressed her desire to be called Queen rather than the traditional title of Queen Consort. This deeply angered Princess Anne. She firmly asserted that Camilla was not a queen in the true sense and should only be addressed by the correct title of Queen Consort. The conflict escalated, and although both always maintained a polite demeanor in public, anyone could sense the chilling tension between them that was impossible to hide. Many years after her relationship with Andrew ended, Princess Anne found happiness with Sir Timothy Laurence, a former Royal Navy Vice Admiral known for his calm demeanor discipline and avoidance of the media spotlight. They married in 1992 in a simple yet dignified ceremony. It was Sir Timothy, quietly supporting his wife behind the scenes, who held one of the royal family's biggest secrets. Having served the nation for many years, and possessing a clear-eyed view of what happens behind the royal family's glamorous facade, he discovered something no one else dared to speak about. This secret not only shook the royal family's inner circle, but also had the potential to undermine the public image that people had long trusted about Queen Camilla. Since joining the royal family, Sir Timothy Lawrence's role as Princess Anne's husband has always been clear, quietly protecting and supporting his wife, serving the monarchy, and steering clear of any scandal or power struggles within the palace. He is a man of disciplined responsibility and never lets emotions dictate his actions. However, by 2025, Timothy realized he could no longer stay out of the situation. What he witnessed within the royal family, especially from Queen Camilla, could no longer be ignored. At first, Timothy thought Princess Anne's criticisms of Camilla were simply due to his wife's naturally strong-willed and tough personality. But over time, he began to see that something was wrong. Camilla wasn't just someone who annoyed others. She seemed to act with calculated intent, carefully taking each step as if climbing a preordained ladder of power. When piecing together the events of the past, Timothy began to see how suspiciously everything fit into place. Camilla's affair with Prince Charles years ago not only shattered his marriage to Princess Diana, but also triggered a series of serious consequences, from the highly publicized divorce to Diana's heartbreaking tragedy. While the public may have varied perspectives for Princess Anne, who always places honor, duty, and family above all else, what Camilla did was unforgivable. According to Andrew Parker Bowles, Camilla's former husband, he confided in Timothy that Camilla had once neglected her own children to focus on inserting herself into the relationship between Charles and Diana. For Anne, this only reinforced her belief that Camilla was never truly fit to represent the core values of the royal family. But what's happening now is what truly worries Timothy. In recent years, as King Charles's health began to show signs of decline, Timothy has noticed a clear shift in Camilla's attitude and behavior. She no longer plays the role of the steady support she once claimed to be. In contrast, during royal meetings, internal events, and even family dinners, Camilla began speaking on Charles's behalf, offering opinions and steering discussions. For Timothy, who served in the military as a Royal Navy Vice Admiral, he clearly sensed a change in her demeanor. From a supportive wife, Camilla was positioning herself as a leader, as if preparing for the role of a true queen, going beyond the traditional boundaries of a queen consort. Especially Timothy noticed that Camilla began intervening in sensitive matters, like the Regency Act and succession plans. What's notable is that Camilla didn't just offer opinions, she issued directives and unsolicited advice, particularly to Prince William and Princess Kate. According to Timothy, these lessons sometimes crossed the line, making Kate feel pressured and fueling even more anger in Anne. What do you think about Camilla's interference? Do you feel her actions have gone too far? If yes, leave a 2 in the comments. If no, comment. 5. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to support the channel, giving me more motivation to bring you deeper insights in upcoming videos. However, what hurt Timothy and Princess Anne the most was how Camilla began managing King Charles's time. Under the pretext of protecting the king's health and peace of mind, Camilla increasingly limited his interactions with family, especially with Anne. On more than one occasion, Princess Anne returned home disappointed after last-minute cancellations of private meetings with her brother, moments she always cherished which Camilla skillfully blocked. For Anne, this wasn't just an inconvenience, it felt like a deliberate sidelining of family ties, eroding the trust between close relatives. Even the small family gatherings at Clarence House events that should have simply been moments to strengthen sibling bonds began to shrink. Strangely, Princess Anne was often left off the guest list. For someone who always puts family first, this was no small matter. What worried Sir Timothy Laurence the most wasn't just the outward distance, but something deeper, a form of hidden power quietly spreading like a cold mist over the royal family. Timothy noticed how Camilla used words like a sweet yet corrosive weapon. She would gently say to King Charles, "Anne is just busy with horses and charities. She doesn't understand the real pressures of leadership like we do." In front of others, she appeared humble, but behind their backs, she skillfully sowed seeds of doubt. To the courtiers, Camilla expressed concerns that Prince William was too modern words that seemed harmless, but acted like a silent dagger cutting into the image of the heir to the throne. Timothy clearly understood the meaning behind these words. They were not simply personal remarks. This was a plan, a series of deliberately leaked statements designed to undermine the credibility of those around, so that Camilla could gradually establish herself as the only reliable pillar beside the king. The media campaign and the loaded silence. Then the media began to uniformly change their tone. Suddenly, headlines flooded the press like Camilla, the woman who holds the throne steady, the steady leadership of Queen Camilla. Meanwhile, there was almost no mention of Princess Anne's decades of service or the increasingly prominent roles of William and Kate in carrying the future of the royal family. For Timothy, everything was crystal clear. This was no coincidence. It was a systematically orchestrated campaign, a sophisticated strategy to place Camilla at the center, not only in the king's heart, but also in the eyes of the public. The atmosphere at the 2025 Royal Ascot Horse Racing Festival was as lively as ever, carriages, wide-brimmed hats, the cheers of the crowd. But behind the dazzling lights lay a cold truth. King Charles sat quietly, his face pale, breath weak, exhaustion clearly etched on his features. And then, in a seemingly ordinary moment, Timothy stood near Camilla and accidentally overheard her whispering to her private advisor, "This throne must forever remain in my hands, no matter what happens to Charles." The words stunned Timothy into silence. A chill ran down his spine, colder than any storm he had ever faced at sea. For the first time, he no longer saw Camilla as just a difficult sister-in-law, but as a real threat to the throne and to the royal family itself. After that moment, Timothy began to take action. He searched for answers, and what he discovered shocked him. It was not just a careless remark. It was the culmination of a plan years in the making, a double-edged conspiracy to keep Charles alive, but not strong enough to stand in Camilla's way. Since King Charles began cancer treatment, his health has rapidly declined. The public believed it to be the natural consequence of the disease, but according to a shocking source Timothy accessed, Camilla had influenced the king's personal doctor to intentionally reduce the chemotherapy dosage. Not enough to cause Charles's death, but just enough to weaken him, gradually stripping him of his ability to govern the country, forcing him to rely entirely on his wife. The recorded words sent chills down people's spines. "Keep him alive for the cameras, but weak for me. If he slips up, I will destroy his career and his family." No longer the image of a devoted wife, this was a woman willing to go to any lengths to hold on to power. But it didn't stop there. Camilla was also rumored to have manipulated Charles while he was physically and mentally weak to force him to sign a secret power of attorney document. On the surface, these were just ordinary administrative papers. But in reality, this document transferred control of Princess Anne's charitable funds and inheritance, including those granted by Queen Elizabeth II and backed by the sovereign grant, directly into Camilla's hands. For Anne, it wasn't just about money. It was her career, her personal legacy, the medical, educational, and charitable projects she had painstakingly built over decades. And if Camilla succeeded, she would not only take the money, but also strip away the identity and role of a loyal, quiet, and dedicated royal princess. Princess Anne had firmly insisted that securing her financial safety was not only her right, but also the king's sacred duty. With a husband burdened by inner torment and fear, he had no choice but to yield. It was not just Sir Timothy's suspicions that exposed Camilla's dark secret, but the courage of a seemingly insignificant man, Edward Thompson, a low-level staff member at Clarence House. Edward had quietly witnessed countless whispers, threats, and shadowy schemes surrounding Camilla's private affairs for years. During that time, he chose silence out of fear of severe consequences. But when he heard Camilla threaten the king's personal doctor with words sharp as a blade, he knew he could no longer stay quiet. With trembling courage, Edward secretly recorded the conversation on his phone, hiding it in his coat pocket as his heart pounded with every beat. That small act of bravery transformed Edward from a silent observer into the keeper of the key to the survival of the entire monarchy. When Sir Timothy received the recording, he felt a cold punch to his heart, later confessing to close friends, "This is no longer rumor or suspicion, but undeniable proof that Camilla's ambition has crossed the line, possibly even into criminal behavior." For Sir Timothy, discovering this truth was a heavy burden, but also an unshakable mission. He understood that holding this truth meant possessing the power to either break or save the kingdom. The issue was no longer just about King Charles's health or Princess Anne's finances, but the very soul and honor of an entire realm that millions around the world still revered. Despite the weight of guilt and responsibility pressing on his shoulders, Sir Timothy knew this was only the beginning. If Camilla was bold enough to manipulate the doctors and coerce the king himself, no one knew what else she might be capable of. Unable to delay any longer, he resolved to reveal the whole truth to the king. For Sir Timothy, uncovering this truth was a heavy burden, but also an unavoidable mission. He understood that holding this secret meant possessing the power to either break or save the dynasty. The issue was no longer just King Charles's health or Princess Anne's finances. It was the very soul and honor of a monarchy revered by millions worldwide. Despite the weight of guilt and responsibility on his shoulders, Sir Timothy knew this was only the beginning. If Camilla was bold enough to manipulate doctors and coerce the king himself, no one could predict what else she might do. Without hesitation, he decided to reveal the whole truth to the king. When the truth reached King Charles, it wasn't a single blow, but a series of violent waves crashing over his frail body. His heart shattered not only from the betrayal, but also from his own blindness. For more than 3 decades, Charles had steadfastly defended and proven his love for Camilla before family, church, and the public. He had defied public opposition to keep her close, insisting that their love was genuine and unshakable. Memories flooded Charles's mind, images of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, who had always shown clear caution whenever Camilla's name was mentioned. From the wedding day, when the Queen avoided taking photos with the newlyweds, she had only ever accepted Camilla reluctantly. At the time, Charles thought it was just the conservative view of an old generation, but now that judgment felt like a forewarning. Perhaps the Queen had seen it all along, that Camilla was not truly his partner, but a schemer. Charles recalled the long days lying in his hospital bed, exhausted from chemotherapy. He remembered the times Camilla sat beside him holding his hand, whispering words of comfort. But how many of those were lies? How many of those gentle touches were just a performance to hide ambition? This realization dug deep into his heart, turning him from a man standing strong into an empty shell. Not only was his body weakening, but his soul was fracturing as he recognized that the partner he had trusted for so many years was actually the mastermind behind a dark conspiracy. Yet what troubled him most wasn't the personal pain, but the fear of the royal family's reaction, his children, his sister, and his advisors. They had sacrificed so much for him, always standing by his side. Now, because of his choice, they had to endure the shame of scandal. For a man who had spent his entire life preparing to become king, the crown felt heavier than ever before. And for the first time in his reign, Charles wondered if he still had the strength and authority to continue wearing that crown. The heir's reaction. Prince William. When the video recording of Camilla's threats was played in front of Prince William, his reaction was immediate and intense, usually a model of calm composure that calm shattered completely. His face turned pale, then flushed red with uncontrollable anger. For William, this was not just an ordinary scandal, but a slow assassination, a ruthless plot to poison his father through cruel schemes to seize power. That anger transformed into unshakable determination. Rising above the initial shock, William quickly stepped up to take control of the situation with the assuredness of a natural-born leader. He made it clear that this was no longer a private family matter, but had become a legal crisis that demanded swift and decisive action. While William reacted fiercely, Princess Anne, known for her strong will and unshakable calm, broke down. Her tears were not from weakness, but from the burning pain and deep sorrow of a sister witnessing her beloved brother being cruelly manipulated and harmed. Princess Anne painfully recalled their late mother's final admonitions about her financial independence. Queen Elizabeth II had always been meticulous in ensuring that the charitable funds and assets meant for her daughter were securely protected from any risk of exploitation. Now seeing Camilla attempting to seize those sacred legacies, Anne felt she could no longer bear it. Standing firmly beside Prince William, Anne became a voice that no lawyer or advisor could replace. With a tone full of righteous anger, she clearly outlined the historical weight and profound emotional significance of their mother's will, while exposing the illegality and murky financial schemes orchestrated by Camilla. In the meeting room, the royal council, comprising senior advisors, top lawyers, and a few trusted friends of Queen Elizabeth, listened quietly. 3 tense hours passed as they debated vigorously over the legal and political consequences of the evidence. Could the truth be made public? Would exposing Camilla shatter the already fragile image of the monarchy in the modern world? Yet no doubt remained. Even the most cautious advisors admitted that if Camilla's conspiracy continued, it would not only destroy King Charles but also threaten to overturn the entire crown. One by one, hesitant voices gradually fell silent. And when the session ended, everyone reached a consensus. Camilla would be stripped of all executive powers and financial control. All charitable funds and assets that she tried to seize would be returned to Princess Anne and placed under the joint supervision of Anne and William. From now on, Camilla's role would be nothing more than an empty shell. She would only be the queen consort in name, without any real power. The council also made one final, equally important decision. This scandal must never be allowed to leak to the public. The secret that the queen consort had conspired against the king had to be kept under wraps because if it got out, people would start doubting the king's health and capability. Everything had been arranged smoothly, except Camilla had no idea how her life was about to change. When the news that her secret had been exposed reached Camilla, people expected her to be scared, remorseful, or at least pretend to be. But no. The walls of Clarence's house shook with her furious screams. Camilla paced the room like a cornered beast, hands, trembling face twisted with rage. She had spent her entire life climbing to the pinnacle of the monarchy, standing at the center of power. The thought that it could all be swept away in a single moment was unbearable to her. In a panic, Camilla made a reckless decision, revealing the depth of her fear. She summoned a close aide and coldly ordered eliminate Sir Timothy Laurence. She blamed him entirely, accusing him of being overly curious, digging and exposing the secrets she had deliberately kept hidden. The assassination plot fails and tensions escalate. However, the assassination plot never succeeded. The plot was discovered and stopped before Sir Timothy's life was ever threatened. This event only reinforced the council's belief that Camilla was dangerous and mentally unstable. The news of the failure quickly reached her ears, causing Camilla's state of mind to spiral further into chaos. The palace, once the stage for her sophisticated manipulations, had now become a suffocating prison where every glance felt like a threat. She paced endlessly through the corridors, her mind tangled with impossible scenarios. She thought of ways to regain her position of power and silence her enemies. But every idea collapsed into the same conclusion: she had failed. But Camilla had no idea that the cruelest fate was yet to come. A simple letter sealed with the royal council's emblem was delivered to her. That seal signaled a serious message. With trembling hands, Camilla tore open the envelope and began to read. The merciless words, written in the cold language of law and order, clearly stated her executive powers were completely revoked. Her influence and authority would be stripped away. She would retain only the ceremonial title of Queen Consort, with no rights or power beyond a mere formality. Her eyes gradually dimmed, her face turning pale as she read each line. Those who witnessed it later recalled seeing her sit silently clutching the paper until it was torn and tattered. She had fought her entire life to be recognized as Charles's official partner, to reach the position she believed was her destined right. Now all of that had vanished. The letter slipped from her hands onto the floor. For a long while she just sat there, staring blankly into space. Then unusual tears began to fall. She wept not for Charles, nor for the family that had been shattered, but for herself and the dream that had died. But now everything had slipped away. The letter fell from her hands onto the floor. For a long time, she just sat there staring into space. Then unusual tears began to fall. She cried not for Charles or the family that had been torn apart, but for herself and the dream that had died. That night, standing before the mirror, the woman who looked back was no longer a powerful queen, but a 78-year-old woman with empty eyes and a wrinkled face. Camilla's resilience had completely collapsed. She shut the door to her room and refused to see anyone. The palace, once her throne, had become a prison. Her dream of power didn't just slip away, it turned to ashes. She wasn't exiled to a distant land, nor publicly humiliated. The harshest punishment she faced was to live the rest of her life in emptiness and under the disdain of her own family. Although her actions deserved imprisonment, this punishment was even more severe. Camilla had to live in solitude, consumed by anger and contempt. Her story ended in complete failure, her malicious ambitions shattered, leaving only an old woman staring into the mirror, wondering had she ever truly won anything. What do you think about the Royal Council's decision? Was that punishment fair for what Camilla did? If not, what would you consider a more just penalty? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more compelling stories. And remember to click on the next video on your screen. You're going to love it. This is purely for reference purposes, only based on hypotheses and unverified rumors, public speculation. Let's discuss it from an objective analytical among elite observers that the succession mechanism at Kensington does not operate merely on a simple when the time comes basis, but is instead governed by an emergency brake system. As a royal figure approaches the milestone age of 40, triggering the activation of a massive trust fund from the past, we might assume this to be an automatic process. But no. For a long time, the public has been swept up in media sparring, yet according to our analysis, the true tip of the iceberg lies in the flow of finances. The hypothesis raised here is this. Does an older brother acting as the future guardian of the system have the right to intervene in the flow of a younger brother's assets on the basis of moral standards? There are indications that a strategy referred to as a localized asset freeze is being considered. Rather than impulsive outbursts of anger, this appears to be a cold, calculated move grounded in a doctrine of preserving honor. The core argument placed on the scales is this: when a member breaks away from the system's shared orbit, do they retain the same privilege of drawing upon that system's resources? To truly understand this legal machine, we must look away from the headlines and step into the imagined space of the muniment room, the repository of memory and highly classified documents. According to analytical data on aristocratic customs, the key to this matter does not lie in existing law, but in a more abstract concept, the letter of wishes. A handwritten document from 1993 is now regarded as the most critical variable. For 3 decades, it was merely a sheet of paper resting silently in the archives. Today, however, amid shifts in family structure, this document has suddenly become a legal shield. Our hypothesis is this: the document does not merely govern money, it establishes a moral filter. Can a handwritten piece of paper from 30 years ago truly have the power to halt the flow of millions of dollars? That is the million-dollar question we need to answer. If you appreciate our approach of hypothesis and analysis rather than baseless rumors, leave a comment saying agreed and share this video with friends who share a passion for uncovering the truth. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because the most unexpected variables have yet to be revealed. Its contents, though never officially made public, are believed to enshrine an unbreakable principle of the late mother: wealth must serve the well-being of her children, yet at the same time function as a resource to protect and uphold the dignity of the family. So what happens when these two objectives, individual interest and family honor, move in opposite directions? In your view, within a system that places such high value on tradition, can a handwritten spiritual testament truly possess enough power to override rigid financial rules? Or is this merely the opening move in a broader redefinition of inheritance itself? For many years, the working assumption of the one who departed rested on what was considered an absolutely safe variable, that the flow of finances from the maternal bloodline was untouchable, entirely separate from the royal family. He believed that biological status, being Diana's son, would always outrank political status. However, a sharp counter-argument is now being actively debated. On the side of the heir to the throne, William, there appears to be a deliberate effort to redefine the concept of entitlement. The reasoning here is not emotional, but rooted in asset management logic, the purpose of the capital itself. If the 1993 letter is treated as the constitution of the trust, then it contains a brutal paradox the system is now forced to confront. The original intent of the bequest was to provide resources for independence and security. Yet in today's reality, that very flow of capital is suspected of being used to finance a media machine that turns back and attacks the very foundation that created it. This is what analysts describe as the self-destruction paradox, using a mother's legacy to pay lawyers and PR teams in a campaign that erodes the honor of her own family. In the eyes of the system's managers, this is no longer about purchasing a house, but about financing a confrontational campaign. A common counter-question is often raised. Is this simply greed? Publicly available financial data suggest the answer is no. As Prince of Wales, William's income and assets far exceed any personal needs. Therefore, this move to freeze assets is not economic in nature, but instead reflects a strategy of protecting the legacy brand. The system's greatest fear is not the loss of money, but the commodification of pain. The transfer of physical assets, potentially including priceless personal mementos, to a location beyond direct oversight in California, carries the risk of their becoming mere props for entertainment products on digital platforms. William, in his role as guardian, is sending a powerful signal: sacred legacy cannot be collateral for Hollywood. To decode the next move, we must shift our geographic coordinates, leaving London for Althorpe, the ancestral seat of the Spencer family. There, a third figure stands at the center of the storm, the 9th Earl Spencer. Consider the extraordinarily complex position of this figure. In 1997, he was the one who made a historic vow before the world to protect both nephews from being consumed by the royal institution. But nearly 30 years later, that promise has turned into a diplomatic curse. He is no longer merely an uncle. He has become the last remaining buffer zone. Well-informed sources suggest that the mode of communication from the royal side has shifted, no longer framed as family appeals, but as institutional pressure. The implicit message sent to Althorpe carries more political weight than familial warmth. It is a demand for the synchronization of loyalty. The logic William's side presents to his uncle is cold, yet difficult to refute. How can he protect his sister's legacy if he continues to fund activities that actively harm that very legacy? The argument from the heir to the throne. William is rooted more in military logic than in family sentiment. If an estimated $10 million in assets were to be released, at this moment it would not simply be a birthday gift. In the system's eyes, this would amount to funding the counterforce. The media apparatus the younger brother is building is no longer viewed as a peripheral nuisance, but has been identified as a competing entity actively eroding the credibility of the very institution William is destined to lead. Consequently, any flow of money from Althorpe to California at this moment would be regarded as fuel for the next wave of attack. Earl Spencer now finds himself trapped at a brutal strategic crossroads. A subtle yet weighty implicit message has been delivered. Will he choose to stand with the stability of the crown, or lend strength to an unstable variable? The Earl now faces a profound moral paradox. On one side lies the oath of blood, a commitment to protect the most vulnerable of his nephews. If he locks the vault, he risks becoming the villain in the next chapter of history, accused of betraying the wishes of his late sister. But on the other side stands political reality. William holds the power of the future. Defying the direction of the crown could lead to social isolation for the entire Spencer line. So what is the technical solution here? This is where we must understand a specialized financial mechanism of the aristocracy, the discretionary hold. The audience needs to understand that these trusts do not operate like an ATM. The trustees hold an emergency brake. Technically and legally, they have the authority to suspend distributions if they determine that the beneficiary is in a state of instability. In the past, this has applied to cases of bankruptcy or loss of behavioral control. But today, legal teams are expanding that definition. They argue that the beneficiary is operating under the influence of external hostile actors. A case file is being assembled to legitimize a carefully phrased answer, "not at this time." This is not confiscation, but a protective, temporary lock. Pressure at Althorpe is reaching a breaking point. Two ends of the phone line, two opposing poles of power and rebellion, are both awaiting a decision. One side demands a freeze, the other demands liquidity. And the man in the middle understands one thing clearly: whichever choice he makes will constitute a breach of trust. However, William's move does not stop at internal pressure alone. Analysts suggest that the true force driving this hardline stance is a darker fear, one that extends far beyond Britain's borders. It is the scenario of a jurisdictional clash with courts in California, where royal secrets could be exposed in their most raw and unfiltered form. While the English countryside holds its breath, the real fuse is quietly smoldering 5,000 miles away. To outside observers, freezing the flow of money may look like a punitive move driven by personal motives. However, sources with deep insight into royal strategy point to a critical psychological shift. The motivation has moved from emotional anger to legal fear. On the desks of key decision-makers, a new file labeled California Jurisdiction Risk is being closely scrutinized. The real concern is not the heir's ability to spend money, but the asset permeation mechanisms inherent in the place where he now resides. We must remember one key technical factor. California is a jurisdiction that applies an exceptionally strict community property regime. This is precisely the technical trap that advisors are warning about. Top-tier lawyers have advanced a chilling hypothesis in asset management: the concept of commingling. Their argument is razor-sharp. Once inherited assets, whether cash or priceless heirlooms, cross the Atlantic and are deposited into shared household accounts or used to renovate jointly owned property, they lose their exempt status. At that point, legally speaking, it would no longer be the private property of the Spencer line. It would be transformed into marital property. And it is precisely this transformation that fuels the sleepless nights of legacy guardians in Britain. A professional risk manager never operates on faith in the permanence of love, but must plan for the worst-case scenario: the dissolution of a partnership. No matter how firmly the principles assert stability, the system itself is not permitted the luxury of optimism. If an asset division were to take place under the ruling of a Los Angeles court, the 50-50 rule could be triggered. Imagine a scenario in which historically significant emeralds or funds reserved exclusively for royal bloodlines are compelled to be transferred to an external entity as part of a divorce settlement. For the future head of the monarchy, this is not about losing money. It is an irreversible leakage of legacy. It is an apocalyptic vision in which family history becomes collateral on a negotiating table in America. This is a fear that is instinctive, reaching far beyond the scale of palaces. Whether it is a national treasure or simply an old family photo album, the desire to protect what our ancestors left behind and to ensure it is passed on to the right hands is entirely legitimate. I hope you and your families are safe and able to preserve your own core values. Our community is growing every day. Let me know in the comments which city or country you're following this story from. Is the concept of inheritance where you live viewed differently? Returning to the strategic chessboard. To neutralize this California trap, a complex legal maneuver is being pushed forward known as a protective trust variation. This is Plan B. If persuasion through emotion fails, the system will alter the distribution structure itself. The objective is no longer outright prevention, but a redefinition of ownership. Funds may be spent, but permanent control will never leave London. Could this protective trust variation be the comprehensive solution, allowing the elder brother to safeguard the legacy while the younger still receives support without being entangled? Or will this mark the beginning of an unprecedented transcontinental legal battle in royal history? Time will provide the most accurate answer. Instead of a direct wire transfer to Montecito, a far more intricate financial structure is now being put in place, a UK-based frozen subtrust. This is not expropriation, but a restructuring of ownership. The mechanism functions like a one-way valve. The beneficiary, Harry, would still retain the right to receive generated returns, passive income, that could be used, for example, to fund the education of the next generation. However, the principal and physical assets, such as historic jewelry, would remain permanently behind a legal firewall. The implicit message of this structure is unmistakable. You may benefit from the legacy, but you may not liquidate it. It entirely removes the risk of assets being sold off or becoming subjects of civil litigation in the United States. This strategy elevates the issue from an internal family dispute to a high-level corporate risk management problem. Technically speaking, London is issuing an expert judgment on its own CAPA. They argue that the beneficiary's current legal environment is not sufficiently secure to safeguard national assets. The objective is to construct a legal fortress around the memory of the late mother. All assets must remain on British soil, be governed by British law, and be placed entirely beyond the reach of California judges. As this fortress is being reinforced, the position of those outside the walls begins to resemble an economic siege. If moral negotiations fail, legal experts point to the existence of a Plan B, a move that is cold but constitutionally sound. That is the activation of the Protective Trust Variation Clause. Under normal circumstances, the distribution process at age 40 is automatic. The beneficiary has full discretion to invest, spend, or even squander the funds. However, a new legal argument is now being advanced grounded in the principle of exception due to circumstances. Under this mechanism, nominal ownership would remain with Harry to avoid violating the will, but actual control would be completely separated. The $10 million inheritance would never leave London. It would be locked inside a digital vault managed by trustees loyal to the Crown. What we are witnessing is a William acting not out of emotion, but out of concern for the survival of the system. But the question remains, where is the line between protection and expropriation? What do you see in this powerful figure? Leave a comment with the number 2 if you view this as tough love, a necessary action to prevent money from flowing into outside hands. Leave a comment with the number 5 if you see it as the cruelty of power, an economic punishment aimed at a weaker brother. The judgment is yours. Hit like to support the editorial team and subscribe to the channel now. We'll be back with classified files that have never been made public. This represents the pinnacle of soft power strategy. The beneficiary may receive an annual allowance drawn from interest sufficient to cover basic living expenses, but the vast sums required to sustain a high-security lifestyle and service large real estate mortgages would remain out of reach. By framing the action as a protective measure, the guardian William effectively arms himself with a shield of immunity against accusations of greed. The final argument placed before asset managers is not emotional, but a brutal financial forecast. If the full principal is released right now, the current burn rate projects that the entire legacy will evaporate within 36 months. We are holding the money not to seize it, but to ensure it survives for the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the future. The case from London is constructed on a cold balance sheet at the present level of spending on private security, prolonged litigation, and public image operations. The $10 million fund is projected to disappear rapidly. The Guardian's task, William, is no longer to placate his brother, but to enforce the duty of intergenerational capital preservation. The ultimate objective is to ensure that this pool of assets remains intact when the next generation, Archie and Lilibet, comes of age. This is an exceptionally shrewd communications move. It positions William as a visionary steward, while implicitly casting the Duke of Sussex as a high-risk investor, insufficiently equipped to manage the family legacy. Now imagine the psychological shock through the lens of game theory. Harry left the United Kingdom in search of absolute autonomy and escape from the control of the royal administrative apparatus. But if this protective trust mechanism is activated, he would be trapped in a bitter paradox, a 40-year-old man who in operational financial terms is supervised like a minor. This mechanism demands absolute transparency. Funds require receipts, spending requires justification. The trustees would become the filtering mechanism, and indirectly, they would report back to the head of the system. The implicit message is clear. You may leave the system, but the system's resources will not be used to finance opposition to it. Moreover, this strategy neutralizes every potential media attack. If Harry were to claim he has been stripped of his inheritance, William would have a legally impeccable response. The money hasn't gone anywhere. It is still there, completely secure, waiting for your children. This pushes Harry into a state of stalemate. For a Montecito elite lifestyle with operating costs estimated at millions of dollars per year, a frozen trust is as useless as an empty one. You can't pay a security team with projected interest. You can't settle legal bills with future promises. This is a cash flow problem. William is playing a long, strategic game, a war of attrition. He understands that his opponent does not have the time or the financial endurance to pursue a decades-long legal battle before the UK Supreme Court. To grasp why this valve-shutting move has sent shockwaves through California, we need to look at the macro-financial picture of the Sussex brand. Analysts assess that it is entering a state of severe income-expenditure imbalance. For years, Harry operated under the assumption of a permanent safety cushion provided by the Spencer inheritance. That was the final strategic reserve the royal family could not interfere with. But once that cushion is removed, a stark reality is exposed. The business outlook over the past 12 months has taken a negative turn. The $20 million Spotify deal ended in a very public rupture over performance issues. The Netflix partnership is now under heavy pressure to deliver commercially successful content, something that has yet to be achieved with any consistency. The era of easy money earned from celebrity status in Hollywood is drawing to a close, while fixed costs remain unchanged, most notably the massive mortgage on the Riven Rock estate. When we strip away the glossy veneer of private jets and a large entourage of aides, we arrive at the biggest iceberg in the Sussex financial statement's security costs. Since losing the protective umbrella of the state once funded by taxpayers, Harry has been forced to operate a private secret service of a scale comparable to that of a head of state. Experts estimate these costs at between $2 and $3 million per year. This is an enormous fixed expense, one capable of eroding any fortune if fresh cash flow is not continuously injected. Without a stable inheritance stream acting as an anchor, Harry is facing an existential crisis. He is now entirely dependent on the market value of attention in Hollywood. And as any risk manager will tell you, the market is a profoundly fickle friend. This liquidity pressure is producing a psychological state that observers describe as a siege mentality. From the insider's perspective, the moves coming out of London no longer look like protection, but like a systematic campaign of position neutralization. Look at the historical sequence. First came the removal of military titles, loss of hard power. Then the stripping of the HRH-style loss of soft power. Next was the loss of Frogmore Cottage, loss of geographic footing. And now, the system is targeting the final remaining link, the financial legacy left by his mother. The disparity in resources is staggering. One side controls the Duchy of Cornwall with effectively limitless resources, palaces, and treasuries. The other holds a massive mortgage and a podcast channel. For Harry, this is a brutal asymmetry. As the traditional doors at Althorp show signs of closing, the strategy has shifted. Intelligence sources indicate that an effort to activate auxiliary networks is now underway. Rather than confronting the guardian Earl Spencer or the enforcer William head-on, Harry is reportedly attempting to establish contact with the emotional wing of the Spencer family figures, such as Lady Sarah McCorquodale and Baroness Jane Fellows. The objective is to seek an internal alliance among those who still carry living memories of Diana's desire for freedom in order to apply pressure on the management mechanism. However, this scenario is giving rise to a tragic paradox. William seeks to freeze assets to prevent the commercialization of the family. Yet it is precisely this act of shutting off the money valve that may end up accelerating that very process. If the Spencer financial anchor is severed and the American dream turns into a liquidity nightmare, the Sussex couple would be pushed into a corner. To maintain their security apparatus and service their debts, they would be forced to exploit the only asset they have left: information. They would have to write more books, sell more previously undisclosed secrets, produce more shocking reality-based television content. Ironically, William's very act of financial containment could become the survival pressure that compels the other side to sell everything. As the mist settles over the Althorp estate, it becomes clear that this is no longer merely a dispute over money. It is a systemic tragedy in which the very effort to protect a legacy is triggering the mechanisms that may ultimately destroy it. The battle for control of the Spencer treasury teaches us a brutal yet necessary lesson about the law of cause and effect in economics. One of the fundamental principles of game theory is this: you cannot destroy the bridge between two opposing shores and still expect supply convoys to keep crossing it. For many years, the younger brother built his brand around the concept of freedom from the system, freedom from media scrutiny, and freedom from traditional rules. Yet it seems a critical variable was overlooked in this equation. True freedom always comes with a massive depreciation cost. You cannot spend 4 years dismantling the very foundation of your own privilege and then act surprised when the benefits tied to that foundation are deactivated. Through the analytical lens of this channel, William's actions do not stem from personal malice, but from the inevitability of the institution. He is carrying out a form of risk management that can best be described as tough love. He is drawing an inviolable red line. The memory and legacy of his late mother are cultural values, not derivative commodities to be traded for fame in Hollywood. Decision-makers in London recognize that if a shut-off valve is not installed immediately, the history of the Spencer family risks becoming raw material for the next season of a reality television series. Today, William appears to have accepted a strategic trade-off. He is willing to play the villain in his brother's contemporary memoir so that he can remain the guardian in the historical chronicle of Diana. Before we close this file, please note this content is purely for reference based on hypotheses and unverified public speculation. Join our review panel right here, type 1, in the comments if your curiosity has been sparked and you want us to continue digging into these shadow financial files. Type 0 if you have sharper counter-arguments regarding the royal family's strategic moves. Every like and subscribe is the energy that allows us to continue lifting the velvet curtain of mystery. Don't forget to turn on notifications because the truth always waits for the most patient. Goodbye, and see you in the next investigation. Within the structure of a long-standing institution, For an individual to embody the core values of the nation is not only an honor, but also a form of systemic pressure. Princess Anne and King Charles, two pillars of traditional order, have long been regarded as the perfect custodians of the strictest rules. Yet behind the quietude of ceremonial rituals, there appear to be undercurrents of emotion and history that time cannot erase. Could there be an invisible boundary gradually fading? Are the secrets kept for decades truly shadows? Or are they the missing pieces needed to decode the true essence of the resilience we continue to witness? We will not chase rumors. Instead, we will analyze the interactions between individuals within a system governed by age-old conventions. One of the most noteworthy aspects is the relationship between Princess Anne and Queen Camilla. On television, the world sees a harmonious blend of etiquette. However, from a systems psychology perspective, this harmony seems to lack a genuine emotional connection. A static distance exists between them. This isn't a direct conflict, but rather the presence of historical boundaries that have never been bridged. This estrangement is not a random occurrence. It seems to be the inevitable result of a series of events that unfolded decades ago when concepts of duty and affection began to intersect, creating complex variables. To understand reality, we must go back to a time when the old order still reigned supreme. Before becoming part of the power structure, Camilla was associated with Andrew Parker Bowles, a figure with a particularly deep connection to Princess Anne. Here we see a hypothesis of personal sacrifice in the face of systemic barriers. Princess Anne and Andrew once shared a genuine connection. But at the time, differences in faith and the strict rules of the church created an insurmountable wall between them. It's not just a story of two individuals. It's a clash between the yearning for freedom and institutional order. Princess Anne's choice of Andrew as godfather for her daughter Zara demonstrates a timeless appreciation, a bond enduring despite social labels. The complexity intensifies as timelines intertwine, forcing each person to follow a different path. King Charles, then a young prince, entered Camilla's life. An attraction based on calmness and understanding blossomed, but once again the system spoke up. Standards of suitability, family expectations, and military service created a fateful silence. When Charles returned, the old picture had been replaced by a new reality, the marriage of Camilla and Andrew. A cycle of regret and repressed emotions was formed. Could it be that these very knots have created a psychological legacy that influences how members of the royal family interact with each other to this day? Every system operates on a balance between individual ego and collective expectations. When personal emotions are forced to give way to symbolic values, what happens to the truths behind them? What do you think of this hypothesis? Were the strict rules of the past tools for protecting stability, or are they the very source of the silent rifts we are seeing? Time may fade memories, but within the structure of a symbolic family, it often deepens underlying bonds. Princess Anne, after establishing her own path with rigorous royal duties, maintained an invisible but enduring connection with Andrew Parker Bowles. Here we face an intriguing variable. When Camilla entered her formal marriage to King Charles, a complex web of relationships was formed. The woman at the center of the current system had once been intimately connected to both Anne's confidant and her brother. From a systems analysis perspective, this is not simply a love story, but an overlapping of social roles, creating significant psychological pressure on the stability of internal relationships. Princess Anne has always been considered the embodiment of the traditional model, where devotion, order, and adherence to rules are never allowed to be shaken. For a mindset that values consistency so highly, the appearance of Camilla is not just an addition to the family, but a sign of disruptive change. Could it be that in the mind of a heritage guardian, Camilla's presence also evokes the most turbulent periods of the royal family? This contrast isn't an open war, but rather a difference between two sets of values, one representing absolute steadfastness to the past and the other symbolizing adaptation and restructuring after setbacks. For decades, this quietude has been maintained as a shield protecting the public image. However, as roles within the palace begin to be redefined, the cracks in this relationship are gradually becoming apparent. Respect in the royal world is never a free gift. It's a currency that must be accumulated over time and through trials. Their interactions, described as minimal politeness, are in fact a systemic defense mechanism. There are no direct confrontations, no harsh words, only carefully calculated distances. For Anne, acceptance seems like a rigorous verification process. Can an individual truly integrate into the system if they have been a disruptive force in the past? Camilla, in her position, understood that entering an established structure was a journey fraught with prejudice. Princess Anne's strength and assertiveness mirrored the expectations the system placed upon her. In her silent struggle for acceptance, the story wasn't just about who was right and who was wrong, but about how to reconcile old wounds into a shared future. We have journeyed through layers of time, from the harsh rules of faith to the intricate web of personal relationships. Behind the diplomatic smiles and formal ceremonies lies a complex tapestry of sacrifice, responsibility, and emotions never officially named. In a system that values stability, like the monarchy, do forgiveness and acceptance truly exist, or is it all just a perfect arrangement to maintain the survival of a symbol? And if you were in their position, would you choose to uphold old principles or open yourself to a new beginning fraught with uncertainty? In any hierarchy, recognition comes not from words, but from action. Camilla, in her quest for a legitimate place, embarked on what we might call a demonstration of duty. Instead of merely appearing as a symbol alongside King Charles, she became deeply involved in charitable structures and community missions. Under the watchful eye of Princess Anne, who considered devotion the sole measure, a subtle shift occurred. As instinctive resistance subsided, it was replaced by professional recognition. However, we need to analyze carefully. Does this recognition equate to warmth? The answer seems to lie in the gap between two different worldviews. Here we see an implicit dialogue between two schools of thought. Princess Anne, the silence of the rock. She represents the classic royal mindset where duty is performed quietly, without the need for praise and completely detached from the media spotlight. Camilla, modern adaptation. Entering the system from the outside, she understands that the existence of the monarchy in the 21st century requires a bridge connecting with the public through understanding and positive communication. This difference didn't create enemies, but it created two parallel paths that would never intersect. For Anne, the crown was an eternal burden. For Camilla, it was a journey of constant learning. The moment King Charles officially ascended the throne was also the moment the established standards were put to the test. In private meetings behind the palace curtains, Princess Anne played the role of guardian of the standards. Without harsh words, Anne posed a fundamental question: can the devotion of a spouse be measured by time or by genuine transformation? This was not a personal attack, but a test of loyalty to the institution. For someone who had dedicated her life to unconditional service like Anne, the level of devotion was a very high threshold that not everyone could easily cross. As the system sought to stabilize after the upheavals, a new light emerged, altering the entire distribution of energy within the palace. Catherine, Princess of Wales. If Camilla represented the effort to adapt, Catherine embodied a natural harmony. The Princess of Wales not only received public support, but also evoked memories of an ideal role model from the past. From an analysis of her influence, we see a psychological eclipse phenomenon, no matter how hard Camilla tries. Catherine's radiant and amiable presence seems to be casting an invisible shadow. Catherine's rise is not just a story of fame. It is the emergence of a new balancing point in the royal family. Someone who can connect Anne's rigorous values with the approachability of the new generation. We are witnessing a power struggle between positions and influence. While Princess Anne remains a firm moral compass, Camilla faces a new challenge, not only gaining acceptance within the family, but also finding her own voice amidst the powerful allure of the next generation. What is your hypothesis? Is Princess Anne's strictness necessary to uphold the core values of the royal family? Or is the presence of new figures like Catherine the key to this institution's continued existence in the public eye based on analyses of the character and depth of these royal figures? Let's leave comment number 2. If you are impressed with how they are asserting their position and preserving their heritage, leave a comment. Number 5. If you notice other mysteries still waiting to be solved in the future, don't forget to press like and subscribe to the channel book now to avoid missing out on the most insightful analyses of the world of power symbols. In a system built on titles, the emergence of a middle-class figure like Catherine, Princess of Wales, created an interesting breakpoint. One theory suggests that Catherine's sophistication stemmed not from her lineage, but from a combination of modern education and self-effort. This creates a paradox. While the world admired Catherine's approachability within the confines of the ancient walls, she was a challenge to established norms. Could the underlying distance between Camilla and Catherine not be merely personal prejudice, but rather a resistance from an old order to a model of popular monarchy? Catherine represents a future where public support is the true measure of power, something Camilla, no matter how hard she tries, always faces obstacles from the past. Here we see two contrasting journeys. Camilla's journey, a journey of redemption and perseverance over decades to gradually gain acceptance. Catherine's journey, an almost immediate explosion of faith and love. This contrast created systemic pressure on the role of the queen consort. While Camilla relied on experience and perseverance to assert her position, Catherine used soft power, kindness, and modern style to become the soul of the new era. It was a silent competition where every step, every smile was a message about who would truly redefine the image of the royal family in the public eye. Amidst the undercurrents of fame and influence, Princess Anne remained a guiding landmark. As tensions among the female members of the family showed signs of escalating, Anne took what analysts called asserting priorities. Instead of engaging in debates about media image, Anne focused on strengthening the crown's power structure. She chose to act quietly but decisively, prioritizing core tasks that she believed were essential to the institution's survival. Her actions were not merely fulfilling her duty, but a message to both Camilla and Catherine that glamour may come and go, but responsibility to the crown is constant. Our investigation into the hidden corners of the palace has revealed a multifaceted picture. Anne's meticulousness, Camilla's persistent efforts, and Catherine's modern appeal. Three women, three representatives of different periods of history, are together creating a turbulent new chapter for the British monarchy. If you were at the helm, would you prioritize the steadfastness of tradition, like Princess Anne, or the modern adaptability of Catherine? Can Camilla truly overcome the shadow of the past when the standards of the ideal queen are gradually changing with the next generation? And finally, how will Princess Anne's next actions affect the power structure between Camilla and Catherine? Is her silence an acceptance or a warning of impending upheaval? While discussions about the royal family's future continue in London, Princess Anne chooses to appear in a highly symbolic setting, Guernsey Island. This was not merely a diplomatic visit, but a journey into the core of history, where 80 years ago the concepts of freedom and resilience were redefined after the dark years of World War II. From a systemic perspective, Princess Anne's presence at the 80th anniversary of Liberation Day was a strategic move to strengthen the living thread. She represented not only the crown, but also the continuation of a legacy left by Queen Elizabeth II, the royal presence in vital moments for the nation. A remarkable aspect of Princess Anne's approach is her breaking down of ceremonial barriers to connect with personal stories. When she takes the time to listen to the elderly, the last remaining witnesses of the occupation, a historical energy exchange takes place. She doesn't seek glamorous photos for the media. Her attentiveness is a message of recognition. For those who have lived through fear and loss, Anne's presence is like an affirmation that their sacrifices are an integral part of the national fabric. This is how the royal family maintains its legitimacy, not through social media posts, but by being the keepers of the flame for the most important memories. At the solemn church ceremony, Princess Anne's speech carried special weight. Her affirmations of not being forgotten were not merely words of comfort, but a commitment from the institution. In particular, her conveying warm congratulations from King Charles created a resonance effect. We see a well-coordinated mechanism. The king entrusts his faith, and Princess Anne, as the most dedicated executor, translates that faith into practical action. Recalling the hospitality received by King Charles and Queen Camilla a year earlier is also a clever way to unite the royal family members, despite the differences in personal styles we've analyzed earlier. The subsequent journey to Sark Island, a small but historically rich community, further clarifies Anne's philosophy. No community is too small to be forgotten. Her unwavering commitment to this memorial tour, despite the pressures and demanding schedule, demonstrates an ironclad sense of responsibility. It is her way of protecting the crown, by being present where it is most needed at the most meaningful time. Princess Anne's trip to the Channel Islands painted a stark contrast to the media frenzy at the palace. While the world was busy comparing Catherine's modernity with Camilla's efforts to adapt, Anne quietly built bridges between the past and the present. A hypothesis for us to ponder. Could it be that these quiet, historically significant journeys are what truly keep the monarchy standing against the storms of the digital age? In a world changing so rapidly, is Princess Anne's steadfastness to the past an outdated value or an indispensable spiritual anchor for the people? How do you assess the way Princess Anne represented King Charles in these historical events? When a royal visit sheds its rigid ceremonial layers, it becomes a reunion of witnessing souls. In Guernsey and Sark, we see not just a princess on duty, but a memory archive in operation. Personal stories, inherently small compared to the grand narrative of history, are the very atoms that make up the power of the crown in this new era. Perhaps the true value of royalty lies in its ability to transform the dry data of war into vibrant emotions. Let's analyze how the last surviving witnesses passed on their historical genetic code to future generations through Princess Anne. Let's consider the case of Winnie Coe. At age 85, the memory of her first chocolate bar was not simply a taste experience. From a systems analysis perspective, it marked the collapse of an isolated order and the rebirth of hope. In an environment where hunger was used as a tool of control, tasting the sweetness of relief packages was an emotional revolution. The contrast between the fear of receiving candy from an enemy soldier and the pure joy of accepting help from an ally creates a complex psychological structure. Princess Anne, by listening to these details, inadvertently acts as an authenticator of the human values that triumphed in the darkest hour. Another aspect of the heritage preservation system is the ability to reconstruct pain. Sally Roberts' story and the poem extracted from wartime letters are a prime example. Instead of being left to rot in a drawer, these old manuscripts were transformed into a public message before the royal court. This was a mechanism of collective spiritual purification. When the poem was read aloud before Princess Anne, it ceased to be the property of a single family and became part of the national heritage. Royal recognition elevated personal emotions to an enduring spiritual value, reminding us that forgetfulness is a second occupation. Finally, let's analyze Jeff Nicholson's reaction to the princess's unannounced visit. In a world where every royal move is meticulously planned down to the second the 30-minute preparation period seems like a test of authenticity. This surprise removed the barriers of elaborate preparation, leaving behind a purely human encounter. This can be seen as a highly effective visible presence strategy. It shows that royalty doesn't just exist in staged events, but that they are always ready to be present in the reality of the people. Princess Anne's journey through the islands was more than just a celebration of the 80th anniversary of liberation. It was a profound inquiry into the power of memory and the role of gratitude in shaping the future. From the sweetness of chocolate to verses from memory, it all created a symphony of resilience. In the digital age where everything moves so fast, are we losing the ability to listen to the small stories that hold such great value as Princess Anne did? Within an institution where stability is measured in centuries, even the slightest shift in the frequency of appearances and public response signals a profound structural realignment. As Princess Anne continues to reinforce the foundations through sheer endurance, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, begins to occupy the emotional space of the public, a systemic question emerges. Where will Queen Camilla's position lie within this new map of influence? From a strategic analytical perspective, we are witnessing an invisible yet extraordinarily powerful convergence between Anne's steel discipline and Catherine's soft power. This convergence is exerting an invisible pressure on the role of the Queen Consort, compelling the system to recalibrate itself in order to meet the public's increasingly high expectations. A compelling illustration of this soft power was the quiet yet highly symbolic visit by Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, to Guildhall. This was not merely a conventional Holocaust memorial event. It was a lesson in how a modern symbol can connect with humanity's deepest wounds. Catherine's appearance, unconfirmed, until the very last moment generated a distinct psychology of surprise effect. In the world of media, Withholding information is not a flaw, but a deliberate strategy to focus attention on the message rather than the ritual. When Catherine entered the room, the atmosphere stirred not merely because of celebrity, but because of the presence of a guardian of memory. What elevated this visit far beyond a royal obligation was the thread of continuity dating back to 2020. Catherine did not simply meet historical witnesses. She applied her own artistic lens to preserve their faces and souls through the commemorative photographs marking the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Here let us examine a hypothesis. When a member of the royal family personally undertakes the preservation of heritage through art, they are no longer an external observer. Catherine has woven herself into the historical continuum of the witnesses. The reunion at Guildhall was not a diplomatic ritual, but a deeply human encounter. Her body language, eye contact, and gentleness testified to a form of systemic empathy, something no title alone can organically confer. In the solemn chamber of Guildhall, amid candlelight and tear-filled speeches, Catherine stood as a bridge between a painful past and a hopeful future. The photographs she had taken years earlier were displayed once more, but this time they carried a different weight. They were evidence of long-term commitment. This contrast poses a genuine challenge for Queen Camilla. While Camilla relies on experience and formal presence, Catherine is building an empire of trust, grounded in empathy and deep personal connections. Could this mark a turning point, one in which Anne's quiet influence and Catherine's increasingly radiant stature redefine who truly embodies the soul of the monarchy? In a world saturated with noise, silence can sometimes be the most powerful language of all. At the memorial ceremony, Catherine did not choose to place herself at the center of speeches. Instead, she chose empathetic presence. By standing quietly observing and listening to the historical witnesses, Catherine demonstrated a fundamental truth of soft power. Respect is not built through words, but through the capacity for genuine empathy. Her gaze never left the survivors, those who had emerged from the ashes of history. It was not the curiosity of a detached observer, but the conviction of a guardian of legacy. Beside her, Prince William reinforced an image of continuity and support. They were not standing there merely as members of the royal family. They stood as bridges between a painful past and the future's responsibility to remember. The photographs Catherine took are not simply visual art. They are mechanisms of historical validation, reminding us that humanity endures even in the darkest of moments. However, behind those quiet and deeply human moments, another reality is silently taking shape within the structure of the monarchy. Let us pose a future-oriented hypothesis. What happens if the central pillar, King Charles, is no longer there to maintain equilibrium? From a systems analysis perspective, Queen Camilla occupies a position that is heavily dependent on the king's support. Should that variable change, a reconfiguration of power would inevitably follow. In such a scenario, Camilla could face a form of institutional isolation. On one side would stand the public's near-universal admiration for Catherine, a symbol of modern empathy. On the other side stands the quiet authority and unshakable credibility of Princess Anne, the guardian of the monarchy's most exacting traditional values. In such a scenario, Queen Camilla's position would be caught between two powerful vices of influence. Would her years of perseverance be enough to hold her ground without the protection of the crown itself? Or would she gradually be pushed away from the epicenter of power, making room for a new era, one in which empathy and tradition are redefined by the Anne-Catherine axis? From Princess Anne's quiet, steady steps to Catherine's presence, charged with soft power, every piece seems to converge toward a future matrix of unpredictable shifts within the monarchy. We are not merely witnessing changes in faces, we are observing a large-scale self-recalibration within a millennia-old institution. How do you assess this shift of focus among the generations of women who hold the monarchy's very soul? Is this a preparation for a new era, or a final effort to uphold values increasingly challenged by time? This content is entirely for reference based on hypotheses and unverified public speculation. Let's discuss it from an objective, analytical perspective. Don't stay silent, engage with me. Press 1 for curiosity and 0 for skepticism. Hit like and subscribe to continue the journey of uncovering the secrets behind the spotlight. See you next time. If you looked at the viral images of those 7 mysterious suitcases sitting on the tarmac at LAX and assumed that was the absolute climax of this saga, you have likely missed the bigger picture. And if you believed the dramatic narrative ended when that private jet made an emergency diversion to a high-security military base in Sicily, you are mistaken again. In reality, those explosive events were merely the prologue, a chaotic setup for a much more intense and calculated chapter that is only now beginning to unfold. We are moving beyond the spectacle and entering the most critical phase of this entire investigation, the revelation of cold, hard, and irrefutable evidence. And the man who played the decisive role in this turnaround was the Sussex's old rival, Piers Morgan, a controversial figure whose image is associated with constant warnings to the public. He has been criticized as bitter, even scheming, but today what he is bringing is completely different. Immediately after news broke about Meghan Markle's arrest in Italy with undeclared $12 million in cash, Piers Morgan wasted no time in coming forward. This appearance was a marked departure from his usual style. He wasn't there merely to offer personal anecdotes or subjective commentary. Instead, he arrived armed with a substantial, meticulously organized dossier that seemed to physically validate the fragmented truths that had been slowly percolating across social media platforms. With a gravity that silenced the room, Piers Morgan made a declaration that resonated with finality. "I've seen her bank records. She's ruined." The tension within the studio became so palpable that the air felt heavy, and not a single colleague dared to interject. At that moment, the noise of celebrity gossip faded away, replaced entirely by the cold authority of documents and financial figures, shocking revelations that he asserted were sourced directly from an active forensic audit currently being executed by Prince Harry's own legal counsel. The sheer magnitude of this truth was something that caught even seasoned observers completely off guard. It increasingly appeared that Prince Harry's legal team was executing a sophisticated tactical maneuver utilizing Piers Morgan as an unofficial conduit to leak privileged information before any Hollywood PR spin doctors had a chance to intervene or sanitize the narrative. The broadcast itself began in a manner that was deeply unsettling. There was no opening music, no frenetic energy, just a heavy, suffocating silence that spoke volumes. Piers sat motionless, his eyes locked onto the camera lens with a look of absolute conviction, devoid of his usual theatricality. When he finally broke the tension, his words were not a question, but a somber vindication. "I warned you all from the very beginning that this was a hoax. I warned you that those tears were nothing more than a performance." He pressed on, his voice dropping, as he addressed the audience with a mix of vindication and genuine disbelief. Even with my notorious skepticism, I never could have fathomed that she would be implicated in something of this magnitude, a sophisticated $12 million money laundering operation routed through a shadowy shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. But we are past the point of speculation. These are undeniable metrics, and they are right here before our eyes. With a deliberate motion, Piers flipped open the dossier to a specific page, prompting the studio cameras to zoom in until the text filled the screens at home. While the sensitive account numbers were heavily redacted with thick black ink to comply with legal standards, the entity listed at the top was starkly legible: Arch Illumination Limited. It was revealed to be a liquidation account held at Silicon Valley Bank, explicitly flagging an urgent wire transfer with a final destination of Dubai. These leaked files appear to serve as the final corroborating puzzle piece, validating the fragmented details that have surfaced in previous independent investigations. What we are witnessing here is not random spending, but a documented pattern of systematic withdrawals hemorrhaging from the Sussexes' joint accounts, a timeline that stretches back exactly 18 months. Piers drew the audience's attention to a critical timestamp buried in the ledger, his finger tapping the screen for emphasis. "Focus on this date," he commanded. "This isn't a coincidence. This marks the exact day the Spotify partnership was publicly terminated." The implication was devastatingly clear. The very moment their primary revenue stream evaporated, she allegedly initiated a series of unauthorized transfers. This behavior cannot be dismissed as a momentary lapse or financial panic. Rather, it bears all the hallmarks of a cold, calculated diversion of assets designed to secure capital before the ship went down. What infused Piers's reaction with such visceral impact was not just shock, but the chilling clarity of recognition. He knew exactly who he was looking at in that grainy LAX airport footage. He recounted a specific encounter with this woman at an exclusive media finance conference in London years prior, where she wasn't discussing public relations but was evangelizing aggressive high-stakes tax avoidance strategies tailored for the ultra-elite. "I knew the nature of her character from that very moment," he stated with grim certainty. "She was a shark in a tailored suit." Seeing this specific figure standing shoulder to shoulder with Meghan on the tarmac signaled that the situation had escalated beyond simple celebrity management. The conclusion was inescapable: the game was over. Meghan hadn't hired a business manager to handle her career. She had retained a professional cleaner to sanitize the trail. Piers then proceeded to drop perhaps the most explosive bombshell of the night, revealing a specific detail that has never before entered the public domain. He exposed a wire transfer totaling exactly $2 million drained from Prince Harry's private trust, the sacred inheritance left to him by the late Queen Mother. Crucially, these funds were not moved to a joint holding, but were funneled directly into an account over which Meghan exercised absolute unilateral control. The timing of this transaction is chilling. It was executed exactly 3 days before the chaotic incident unfolded at LAX airport. This timeline forces us to ask the question that is now echoing across the internet: is this merely a bizarre coincidence, or are we witnessing the final steps of a meticulously planned exit strategy? We want to hear your perspective on this theory. Leave your thoughts in the comments section below, and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you remain on the front line of this developing story as we continue to uncover the truth. The tremble in Piers' voice was unmistakable, vibrating with a level of visceral rage that seemed to shake the very desk he sat behind. As he pored over the damning documents spread out before him, his demeanor shifted from professional analysis to pure moral outrage. She didn't just drain a bank account. She took the entire inheritance that Harry's grandmother specifically bequeathed to secure his future. He seethed. Let's call this what it really is. That is not business, that is grave robbing. His words sliced through the stifling tension of the studio like a razor, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. He proceeded to dissect the financial statement we had uncovered line by line, his tone completely stripped of his usual wit or humor. She genuinely thinks the FBI are fools, doesn't she? He asked rhetorically, locking eyes with the camera. She seems to believe that just because she acted out a role on a TV show, she possesses the capability to outsmart seasoned federal agents. But it is exactly that profound arrogance, that blinding delusion of invincibility, that is guaranteed to be her ultimate downfall. Piers Morgan continued his forensic deconstruction of the event, distinguishing clearly between a simple procedural error and a serious violation of federal law. Let's be clear about the legal reality here. Had she simply declared the currency upon entry, she likely would have faced nothing more than a standard administrative fine or a civil penalty. However, by willfully falsifying a federal customs declaration form, she has irrevocably escalated this situation from a minor infraction into a full-blown criminal felony. Piers then shifted his focus to the sociological fallout, analyzing the unprecedented reaction, or rather the lack thereof, from the Sussex fan community. In any normal news cycle, his social media feeds would be inundated with vitriol-coordinated attacks and accusations of lying. Yet this time, the digital landscape was eerily, surprisingly silent. "Why is there such radio silence?" he asked, leaning in. The answer is simple. You can debate a subjective opinion until you are blue in the face, but you cannot debate hard, cold paper evidence. With a gesture of supreme confidence, Piers tapped the stack of financial records on his desk, visually demonstrating that he had effectively neutralized Meghan's online army, not with rhetoric, but with unassailable facts. Piers paused, looking directly into the lens as he addressed the invisible audience of his former detractors. Where is the outraged chorus now? Where are the vocal critics who branded me a monster simply for daring to ask the uncomfortable questions? He challenged. Was it truly an act of cruelty to inquire why a duchess would be transporting suitcases filled with liquid cash onto a high-security military base in Sicily, or was I simply performing the fundamental, often gritty duty of an investigative journalist? Then the broadcast took a turn that no one saw coming, a sudden palpable shift in emotional temperature. For the first time in years, Piers Morgan dropped his guard to express a rare, genuine sympathy for Prince Harry. He reframed the narrative entirely, painting Harry not as a willing accomplice, but as a man who had been psychologically hollowed out, manipulated, and robbed blind. Let's be honest about the reality here, Piers asserted with a somber gravity. Harry is a man who made a catastrophic error in judgment, yes, but looking at these files, he is no longer just a participant. He is the primary victim of a sophisticated crime. He went further, constructing a powerful argument that Prince Harry requires immediate physical and psychological separation from the Duchess. In Piers's evolving thesis, the dynamic is no longer being framed as a partnership, but rather as a clear case of predator versus prey, where Harry is the unwitting victim in need of extraction. But Piers didn't stop at psychological profiling. In a move that kept viewers glued to their screens, he teased the existence of a smoking gun document, a piece of evidence so volatile that strict legal constraints currently prevent its full publication. However, he made a solemn promise to unveil it in the next installment of this investigation. He described the item in chilling detail, a digital correspondence originating from Meghan's private encrypted server and directed to a high-level contact in Dubai. The timestamp is critical, dated exactly 1 week prior to that fateful flight. The subject line consisted of 2 simple yet ominous words, "Package ready." Piers posited that this email serves as definitive proof of long-term premeditation. It suggests that while she was publicly smiling for the cameras alongside Harry at the Invictus Games, projecting the image of a supportive spouse, she was simultaneously operating in the shadows, sending critical logistical coordinates to her accomplices. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment escape. It was a master plan months in the making. She is finished. Piers reiterated with absolute conviction, punctuating his verdict by slamming the thick dossier shut on the desk with a resounding thud. This isn't just the end of her tenure as a working member of the royal family, nor is it merely the collapse of her celebrity brand. By crossing these legal lines, she has effectively signed away her own freedom. He painted a stark picture of the future, stripping away the glamour that usually surrounds the Duchess. Mark my words, the next time the world catches a glimpse of Meghan Markle, she won't be draped in haute couture or wearing a custom Dior gown on a red carpet. She will be standing before a federal judge in a court of law. And rest assured, I will be there seated front and center documenting every single second of accountability. Piers made it clear that his intense reaction was a necessary step in validating a scandal many had dismissed. By staking his reputation on these documents, Piers Morgan has dramatically amplified the scope of this investigation, commanding the attention of the global press. The impact was instantaneous. Across the Atlantic, editors at major British tabloids were reportedly stopping the presses, scrambling to revise their front pages to feature his defining declaration in bold, unforgiving headlines, "I have seen the files." He took a moment to emphasize the sheer scale of the forensic undertaking involved, describing the recovery of deleted tweets, scrubbed statements, and digital cover-ups, not just as research, but as a digital archaeological dig. He stressed that piecing together these fragments of truth from a deliberate campaign of obfuscation is a time-consuming and laborious task that requires significant resources. Piers then pivoted directly to the audience, issuing an urgent call to action. He encouraged viewers to support the channel's mission by becoming official members, framing this financial support not merely as a donation, but as the fuel necessary to help this story bypass the mainstream media gatekeepers and spread to a wider global audience. Moving seamlessly into the second half of the broadcast, Piers introduced a segment he provocatively titled The Bag Flipping Game. He strode confidently across the studio to a massive electronic smartboard which flickered to life to reveal a complex visual diagram of the alleged theft. He traced the path with his finger, demonstrating that this wasn't a simple linear transfer from the Archewell Foundation directly to Meghan's personal luggage. Instead, the graphic displayed a labyrinthine spiderweb of transactions, an intricate network designed to confuse auditors and hide the true origin of the funds. At the heart of all the transactions was a Delaware-registered company called Project Phoenix LLC, which Piers claimed served as the funnel for receiving the money. Every payment from Netflix, Spotify, or Penguin Random House goes into a shared account, and within 48 hours a corresponding amount is transferred to Project Phoenix to pay for consulting services. Harry signed off on these payments. Piers pointed to the screen, drawing the audience's attention. "Look at that signature," he continued. "That's Harry's signature, but the dates don't match." This shows that these signatures were not real. They were just digital copies. Meghan didn't need Harry's approval for every transaction. She already had his electronic signature on file and automatically approved the funds. Harry was deceived, approving millions of dollars while busy playing polo or writing books. All through a single PDF file, and the truth revealed changed Harry's role from an accomplice to a victim of identity fraud. The unauthorized use of his electronic signature for each transaction constitutes the crime of signature forgery. Piers didn't stop there. He went on to highlight a crucial transaction, a $2 million withdrawal fee taken from the Queen Mother's Trust, the last remaining funds tied to Harry's family history. The receiving account, a Dubai bank called JRA Sovereign Holdings, confirmed the severity of the theft. Colleagues on set were furious, whispering to each other, "She took the Queen Mother's money." The money that was supposed to protect Harry was instead used to aid Meghan's escape. This wasn't just greed, but an act of revenge, a challenge to the organization that bestowed upon her the title she now hides behind Piers Morgan. After dealing with the legal threat, Piers moved on to the previously leaked emails. While unable to provide actual screenshots due to legal requirements, he did read verifiable excerpts. An email sent to an architect listed the assets to be liquidated and not just cash. Piers read each item aloud. First, Diana's watch. Second, the Cartier bracelet. Third, the diamond engagement ring. He paused, his expression serious. Meghan wasn't just taking cash. She also planned to sell jewelry associated with Princess Diana gifts from Harry items symbolizing their love. Piers emphasized that the items were estimated to be worth up to $450,000 and they needed to be sold urgently. He asserted that selling Diana's jewelry on the black market in Dubai was a profound insult not only to the royal family, but also to the British people. Harry, who had always been proud of his mother, would see this as a grave betrayal, viewing her family's heirlooms as easily liquidated commodities. It would be an unimaginable psychological shock. Royal biographer Tom Bower, who was expected to appear on the show later, was overheard in the waiting room, sadly acknowledging the scale of the theft. Piers concluded with a strong plea to the Italian authorities: don't let her go. Confiscate her luggage and search her carry-on. If that Cartier watch is in there, she's smuggling stolen royal property. When the show returned after the commercial break, the atmosphere shifted from investigative outrage to justifiable vindication. Piers addressed the Hollywood elite directly. For years you have lectured us, awarded her prizes, and honored her as an icon fighting against systemic racism. So where are you all today? Piers named the powerful representatives at WME who signed contracts with Meghan, despite knowing full well that her financial books had been manipulated. He criticized her celebrity friends who lent her private jets acting as carriers of illegal cargo. You're not supporting a humanitarian, Piers continued. You're covering up the reputation of a fraud. By protecting her and silencing her critics, you're complicit. You created the shield so she could embezzle $12 million. This is the Piers Morgan effect. Reclaim the awards. Admit if you've been cheated. Otherwise, I'll assume you already know. The next segment of the program revealed a shocking piece of information after the commercial break. A senior member of the British royal family contacted Piers not for an interview, but simply to say 2 words: thank you. This person felt unable to speak the truth, unable to defend themselves, but today they sensed that justice was finally being served. The king was watching. That thank you officially confirmed everything and showed Piers was acting as a secret communication channel for the monarchy. Piers also didn't forget to move on to political issues, particularly the interference of the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. How can a woman transfer $12 million through American banks without IRS interference? Piers questioned. If I transferred $10,000, they would audit me for a whole year. The story becomes increasingly complicated and the questions grow heavier. Will justice truly be served? Or is it all just an elaborate charade? We'll have to wait and see what further revelations come, but this story certainly won't end so easily. She has transferred millions of dollars, and now Piers Morgan is relentlessly raising thorny questions about political protection. He raises rumors that Meghan Markle is being groomed for a Senate seat and is building a network of connections with top Democratic fundraisers. Is she being protected? Is there a no-holds-barred approach to Sussex's records because Meghan is considered a valuable political asset? If so, this is not just a celebrity scandal, but potentially corruption at the highest levels of the U.S. government. Piers called for a congressional hearing demanding the release of suspicious reports from the banks. I want to see that report. I want to know which bank manager discovered it and who covered it up. There can't be 7 suitcases of cash on the runway and no one in power turned a blind eye, Piers said. He invited Dr. Orwell, a forensic psychologist, to join via satellite. Piers asked, "Is she insane or evil?" Dr. Orwell replied coldly, "She's not insane, Piers." Based on the analysis of the power structure and the transformation of the characters involved in this investigation, what are your thoughts? If you find Piers Morgan and the experts' arguments to be valid, please leave a comment. Number 2 in the comments section. If you believe this is just a misunderstanding or a staged scenario to tarnish reputation, please leave a comment. Number 5, don't forget to press like and subscribe to the channel. Join us now as we continue to unravel the hidden corners and complex systems in our upcoming videos. Your support is our motivation to seek the truth. She is a highly extreme, antisocial personality disorder. The plans, the architect, the fake costumes, it's all cold, calculated, rational work. Piers relentlessly criticized she feels no guilt. She's just afraid of being caught. Right now she's sitting in a jail cell in Sicily. She doesn't regret stealing the money. She regrets that the pilot diverted the plane. At the end of the program, Piers held up the last photograph of Prince Harry taken the day before. Harry looked haggard, pale, and lonely. Piers said softly, "Look at him. This is what happens when you let a vampire into your house." She drained his bank account, his joy, his family, and his reputation. Now he's just an empty shell. The man who fought in Afghanistan has been defeated by a Hallmark actress. Looking directly into the camera, Piers continued, "Harry, if you're watching, pick up the phone. Call your father not to ask for money but to apologize, because the only people who will visit you in the hospice are the family you betrayed." Piers went on to announce that the U.S. ambassador to Italy had arrived at the base in Sicily. Don't let them make a deal. Keep an eye on the State Department, Piers warned viewers. If they try to sneak her back to a private clinic in Malibu for burnout treatment, we'll riot. She should be in jail, not at a spa. At the end of the program, Piers welcomed an unexpected guest, a former U.S. federal prosecutor specializing in international organized crime and large-scale asset seizures. This wasn't a famous lawyer seeking attention. "This is the man who sent drug cartels to jail," Piers introduced. The colleagues asked the question everyone wanted answered. Considering the charges of fraud, cyber fraud, money laundering, and misappropriation of trust funds, how long will she face in prison? The prosecutor remained calm and replied, "Ladies and gentlemen, if the evidence you present is credible, then this is not a light punishment. We are facing a serious case under the Criminal Influential and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. Meghan Markle, through a network of shell companies and offshore banks, orchestrated a complex scheme that carries a mandatory minimum sentence. Combined with charges of cyber fraud, customs violations, and illegal transaction structures, she faces a sentence of 20 to 30 years in prison without parole." Piers Morgan questioned her ability to avoid severe punishment, especially given her status as a duchess and mother of a prince's children. But the prosecutor shook his head. Not this time. The king had stripped her of her title, and the State Department was also suffering embarrassment as the incident humiliated the U.S. government at a NATO military base. This will be a lesson for all. No house arrest, no yoga retreats, no luxurious life in Monaco. Instead, Meghan will face years in a federal prison, perhaps FCI Dublin or Alderson, where men in khaki uniforms work for 12 cents an hour. From Duchess, she has become a prisoner, a harsh and inevitable transition. The illusions of exile in Dubai have vanished, and now she must face the reality of a 6x8 meter cell. Arteriovenous malformation (AVM) is an extremely dangerous condition in which the blood vessels in the face connect